2 Samuel 1 through 4. The death of Saul did not unite Israel in wanting David to be their king. In fact, that's the subject of these early chapters of 2 Samuel, to tell us how this happens. David, while he was running from Saul, actually lived in the Philistine city of Ziklag, from which he went out. He would go out and have these raids with the Philistines, thinking he was working for them, but really he wasn't. And he would bring spoils of war to the Judean city of Hebron, among other cities of that lower Judean wilderness. Hebron is a city on that central ridge route, a very important city. And so when Saul dies, David actually goes to live in Hebron, and he's immediately recognized by the people there, and they crown him king. He's now 30 years old, and he is going to be the king over the very independent tribe of Judah for about 7.5 years. Well, meanwhile, Saul, of course, has died, and his son Jonathan. When he died, the most powerful person really in Israel was Abner. He was Saul's cousin and military commander. He anointed Ishbosheth as the next king of Israel. Ishbosheth is the youngest surviving son of Saul. He had the family line ready to go, and so he's the natural thought, or the natural choice of those who wanted Saul to be their next king. He's actually anointed in a city in the Transjordan, which shows in a sense how weak his holding of Israel really was. If we drew his area of where he reigned, it would look something like this. And the reason I show it is because the Philistines still controlled this all-important Jezreel Valley. In fact, Saul died right here. And Canaanites seem to control this very important valley that went into the city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem at this point in history is not occupied by Israelites. So after Saul dies, we now have a new king of Israel. It's the third and last son of Saul. As I say, he's not a very powerful leader. And so in time, Abner realizes that time is short for this 11-tribe confederation. It's just not going to go. And so he goes down and he wants to become loyal to David. Well, David's nephew is his military commander. His name is Joab, and we'll hear a lot of him in days to come. Joab for two reasons possibly. He's jealous of Abner taking his position as military commander, plus Abner had killed Joab's brother in an earlier confrontation. So Joab kills Abner. Now David is not happy about that, and he scolds Joab very strongly about this. Two of Ishbosheth's captains assassinate the king as well. I think they see the weakness of their king. And they even come down and tell David of what they had done, and David executes them. What David is doing very carefully, and I think this is again showing his political shrewdness during this time, is he's not making himself onerous to the 11 tribes. Because after these men are now dead, the tribes, or the elders of the northern tribes, come down to David. And this is the very beginning of 2 Samuel 5. We read this. All the tribes came to David at Hebron and said, Yahweh has said that you will be ruler over Israel. Therefore the elders of Israel made a covenant with David before Yahweh, and they anointed David to be king over Israel. So now we have David for the next 33 years, or a total of 40 years, David will be the king over Israel. The second king, and of course the greatest king that Israel ever had in terms of his resume. And let's speak briefly of that. First, we know he's a military, when it comes to his military prowess, he's an amazing man. He's killed 10,000, right? That was said about him in that poem. Saul has killed his thousands, David his tens of thousands. So a very strong military leader. He's also very politically shrewd when it comes to how he handles politics. Now, he will have a harem. He will have numerous wives. Each of them will probably have a political association. But don't underestimate David's ability to be a politician, and a cunning one at that. But more than anything, and again, God had said a long time ago, I want to choose someone after my own heart. David always has been and always will be a Yahwist.